Hey guys, thanks so much for stopping by to this panel. Hey, your hair looks especially fabulous today, Evo. My name is Malia Probst. We're going to be talking about advertising, live events, and brands, VR, AR, and 360 video. When we go over everything, I would love it if we can be as specific as possible to really give people tangible examples. I feel like that probably helps people a little bit more than, kind of staying up in the philosophical clouds, so to speak. So my name is Malia Probst. I'm a partner at VR Scout. We are an immersive media company. I'm also a partner at the WXR Fund, which is a micro fund specifically focusing on female-led businesses in the immersive tech space. So let's go ahead and go for intros. Annie?
Hi, I'm Annie Lukowski, co-founder of Vanishing Point Media. We are a VR production company, and we do production services as well.
Why are you here talking about this topic, advertising, live events, and brands?
Well, because we are the money. We're basically probably the only people that are making good money on this in VR space right now. I firmly believe that. The eyeballs specifically in 360 advertising are positive. I know Alexis was speaking on the panel earlier, but 28 times brand recognition, 8 times click-through, I think it was like 13 times likelihood to retain the brand. I mean, these are really impressive engagement numbers that you're getting in VR versus traditional ad buys. And I'm happy to sit down in meetings with agencies and tell them all this information. Sadly, there's a lot more TVs than headsets out there, but more and more headsets. Even today or yesterday when Oculus announced their new one. We're very excited about that. Mm-hmm. But it's only going to get better, and then the deeper, stronger penetration engagement levels that we're seeing is just very exciting.
Thank you, Annie. And David, who are you, what do you do, and why are you here talking about this fabulous topic?
All right, I'm Dave Birnbaum. I direct a design team at Immersion. Immersion is completely focused on haptics. Haptics is for the hand like optics is for the eye, so it's technology for the sense of touch. And our end goal is for haptic creative assets to be kind of as important as visual and audio assets, for all three to be coming together to create immersive and multisensory experiences. So I'm most interested in kind of the immersive qualities of live events, how we can bring those immersive qualities to scale with digital tie-ins to those live events, and kind of how to take haptics out of just the lab and the engineering community and move it into something that creative professionals can experiment with and express themselves with.
Awesome. Jeff, who are you? Why are you here? What does your company do?
Yes, I am Jeff Nicholas. I am the director of VR creative and production at Live Nation. I also oversee all of our live stream creative as well, globally. Live Nation, in case you don't know, we're the largest concert promoter in the world. We do 29,000 events a year, 80 plus festivals. We manage over 200 artists. And my small team at Live Nation Live is really focused on amplifying that connection between artists and fans. We do that in a number of different ways. Digital broadcasts is one way, and that's through programs like our Twitter Live piece, our Facebook Live piece, Snapchat, going where fans are. Back in the day, we did 365 shows in a year with Yahoo, and it was the first time anybody had done anything at that scale, and that sort of launched this division here. On the VR side, that folds in because VR and its immersion gives us a new way to create those connections and amplify that experience and really bring people closer to the artists and closer to the events themselves. This particular panel, advertising, brands, and live, that is, we're sitting right in the middle of that. We have a program with NextVR, part of which is sponsored by Citi, and Citi allows fans to come backstage with an artist in a way that only VR really allows. We did a great live stream with Coldplay and Samsung. That was the most viewed VR concert to date, the largest production to date. That was an amazing opportunity, both for the band but also for the brand to kind of expand their reach as well. So lots and lots going on.
Can you share any of those numbers, Jeff?
I cannot.
I asked. I tried, guys. Craig, tell us about you and what you do and why you're here.
Sure, I'm Craig Dalton, CEO of Dodocase VR. We're a headset manufacturer, specifically around custom branded headsets. So we've got a variety of things from Google Cardboard compatible headsets to portable headsets. We've worked with over 1,000 brands and advertisers over the last 3.5 years, and it's largely focused on bringing the audience to the content that's being created. We all know there's a problem with people not owning headsets out there in the world, so we are one small piece of the puzzle trying to solve that problem.
Thanks. Okay, so let's sort of establish a little bit of a base for people and talk about the right now, and then a little bit perhaps about near-term future. So Annie, where do you see the opportunities for live events and brands currently? What are you focusing on? And then maybe what's a little bit that you're looking for in the near-term future?
Well, VR is a great medium to take you somewhere that you can't go. Right? That's what the basis of it is. So brands have a lot of opportunities in that there's environments you want to take them to, whether you're a liquor company and you want to take them out to the field of where the grain is coming from or into the distillery. And that is actually a very easy experience for us to capture and then take the consumer, the viewer on that ride. So making a video like that right now seems to be, I would say, our bread and butter. And being able to take the viewer on whatever curated experience the brand wants, and you can get that out. It's right now, I would say, 360 video. Unfortunately, on the browser, it's not nearly as exciting, but it is where most of the numbers are coming in. So it's important to make sure when you make those kind of videos that you have I would say an enhanced version or a different version that you would have on the browser, and then a different version that would make good for the headset.
Tell us more about that. That difference in terms of delivery system, right? So either, if you're making it specifically for, the end user is going to be watching on a headset, right? Or the end user is probably going to be watching on a flat screen. How does that sort of mix things up for you?
Well, I generally say we shoot everything optimized for the headset. Okay. So on the capture side, I would say the headset, those beautiful wide shots that VR gives you are, what you're going for. And then there's proximity. We all love the stitching errors in VR, but just embrace those stitching errors and put people right next to the camera and solve that problem. And my business partner was up till 2 a.m. last night working on issues, and I think that was like the 7th night in a row he was doing that. I'm very lucky he's a bachelor. So, just embrace those issues and shoot that. But think about having graphic overlays or some sort of other way to augment it, so that when it's a smaller screen, what people are going to be looking at, and the field of view is going to be smaller. So how do you? It really depends on the brand.
Sure. Well, if that's where the numbers are, right? Mm-hmm. If there are more people consuming 360 videos on a flat screen, whether it's in their Facebook feed scrolling around.
I think most of it's actually on their phones, so that's still not nearly impressive.
A little magic window
exactly.
Action. Okay, so you think that adding more graphic overlays is something that sort of helps that content get better viewership and engagement maybe on when it's being consumed on a mobile phone in the little magic window?
I personally think so, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I think so too. Can I add to that?
Go for it.
So, so in our case, though, we're not adding overlays, we're adding haptic effects. So one of our core technologies is we can synchronize a track for the vibrator in your phone to a video. Could be 360, could be linear content. But either way, what you're doing is enabling the director or the person who's a content creator to call attention to particular elements in the video by accentuating them with haptics. And just to be clear, this isn't like a buzz letting you know that something's happening with your phone. It's texture, it's nuanced, evolving texture over time. So, what we recently did a study with 360, and you're right, most people are watching it on their phone. A lot of people are actually using their finger to look around, which is unfortunate. But if you're able to, 360 mobile video headset, it's all about just like heightening sensory experience, which leads to brand engagement. And so by I think you're exactly right, by adding more immersive elements to just a regular video, that does enhance the experience.
Where do you see this haptics for you going in the near-term future? Like near term, we're not talking 10 years out.
Yeah. No, that's great because everyone wants like the suit, and I can talk about that. But in the near future, so mobile is huge. There's 1 billion people or more walking around with a haptic device in their pocket. How do we unlock that for content creators is our big question. Right now, we're doing very interesting work in social and live streaming, where you have people, especially in China. I don't know how many are familiar with the China live streaming phenomenon, but it's an amazing new experience that hundreds of millions of people are engaging in. I look at these streams. I'm looking at it on my work day, so it's like 3 a.m. in China. There's like 80,000 people watching a stream that I'm looking at. It's insane. So this is all about high bandwidth social interaction. You have like tens of thousands of people trying to communicate with this host, competing for attention. The host is showing products. Like there's AR components where people are overlaying lenses so that they're changing the appearance of the host, and she's responding back. And so we're doing interesting work now where we're able to allow people to actually interact with the host in an embodied way, in a manual way, letting people follow her finger and feel her finger, or when they buy her a Bugatti, they can feel the engine roaring, and the whole room full of people can feel that. So for me, that's really interesting because social is all about people connecting with each other, and we come to this conference and don't just do a Google Hangout because we want to be present with each other in a multi-sensory way. And so haptics is actually enabling that today over digital networks.
Jeff, I want to get to you in a second, but I have to ask David, can you tell people about the haptic suit? Tell us what this vision is for our perhaps, hopefully, utopian and not dystopian future.
Yeah, well, my philosophy, it is one of the two, and we won't know for a while, but it's a very binary outcome. But let's say that it goes well. In that case, you're going to, I think we're going to enter an era of sensory abundance. In other words, you're going to be able, most of our technology, most of our economic activity is about controlling our sensory inputs and having the power to control them and make them what we want. And today, I think haptics is lagging behind visual and audio. You can call up almost any audio sensation you want on your phone at any time and any place, and you can't have that with haptics. And so in the far future, you're going to have kind of that same ability.
So suits, haptic suits. Fantastic,
Perhaps,
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. What about you? What do you see? Where are the opportunities for brands and live events right now? Where are they right now? And then tell us a little bit about how you guys are thinking about the near-term future opportunities over at Live Nation.
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious one right now, because of market reach and because we don't have hundreds of millions of headsets in the market. We've got, maybe 20 million headsets. That's all changing rapidly. And you look at Oculus's announcement yesterday with the standalone headsets and everything that's coming, that scale is happening pretty quickly. But because we don't have that many headsets in the market, the brand activity right now is typically about sponsoring, for us, is typically about sponsoring some sort of an event series or some event and then getting a number of different earned media sort of responses from that. Either we'll also do it with in 360, so there's a lot more eyeballs on it in addition to the VR side, or it's just such a big sort of groundbreaking thing, the way that we've done it, the way that it's been shot, the overlays that have been added, et cetera, that tech news picks it up and then sort of mainstream news picks it up. So those are ways that we're engaging with brands right now. It really is more about sort of sponsorship and bringing this access to the fan. As it progresses, we're looking more at brands that are taking a more active involvement in curating a concert series with us, or doing on-the-ground activations at our events that allow people to engage in different ways with different technology. There's nothing like being, I'm strictly speaking for my world now, live music. There's nothing like being sort of arm's reach from an artist, especially from your favorite artist, right? And so the VR really gives us the ability to do that, both live and in pre-record. And brands immediately, as soon as they're a part of that conversation, there's so much value that comes out of being associated with those acts and giving that sort of an experience to a fan. It goes back to the metrics that you were talking about earlier. Where it goes beyond that is sort of anyone's best guess, because I think at this point, a brand has to be taking a pretty big leap of faith to say, I'm going to put my marketing dollars here in a live event that may only get seen by a fraction of 20 million people. in hopes that I will be a technology leader, that I will get enough earned media, and that maybe the 360 component will drive much more viewership. When that sort of changes, when that paradigm shifts, all of a sudden you'll have brands who are now able to get in front of hundreds of millions of people. And on the AR side, that's coming really, really quickly. I mean, next year we're going to see an explosion of it. We're starting to see it now, but you've got hundreds of millions of handsets in the market that are AR capable. That's going to be a place where brands are able to start getting much more active in their involvement and start developing really interesting new case studies that leverage the technology in a way that we haven't seen before. I think there's a lot of innovation that happens from the brand and advertising side when the creatives in the agencies and the creatives at the brand start to look at what's possible and go, okay, how can I build on that? How can I create something new?
What are some of the adventurous brands, that are saying, hey, yeah, we want to be a leader. We want to maybe get a little bit more attention because we're leading in this sort of tech-specific way?
It's interesting. On our side, Citibank has been an amazing partner. They've been a partner of ours for a long time on Citibank pre-sales and some other activations backstage with the Citi Sound Vault. And a lot of these are traditional media components or giving fans access to tickets before the general public. But they came to us and said, we want to be part of the future. What does that look like in the live music space? And for us, it was, hey, we've got this VR, this new VR plan that would really kind of position you on the front lines of that. So they've been a massive partner, and they'll continue to be. It's interesting on the other side of that, like it's a lot of the tech brands that have a vested interest in pushing this forward. So you've got the Microsofts, you've got the T-Mobiles, you've got the Samsungs that are partners of ours in a number of different ways. That's kind of obvious. It's sort of a self-serving wheel right now, but that starts to expand in 2018.
Got it.
I would say the numbers are interesting on who's experimenting. I was just reading an article, and like fast food is one of the pioneering industries. I mean, McDonald's did a massively expensive campaign, and they're not, you would think travel, leisure, and real estate would be the first. But no, it was, I would say fast food has been some of that, and certainly automotive.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I know automotive is using the tech in a lot of ways in terms of building things and using it for design. Like Audi has a thing with Oculus. They just announced Oculus for Business. Like Audi's one of their partners, Walmart's one of their partners.
Well, they even I think it was last year they had it where in the dealerships they had a whole VR experience set up,
which is super cool.
I think where I'm interested to see where it all goes is once we add social layers into VR, so it takes it from this purely individual experience into now I'm connected to tens or hundreds or thousands of people, and then how brands can activate within that starts to become a really interesting place, especially if you're bringing not just an ad. Like I always, when I think of brands and I think of advertising in this space, I don't think of it as a banner ad that's up somewhere in the space. I think of it as an experience that's been brought to the consumer so that you're like, holy shit, I can't believe Audi brought that to me. That was awesome. That sort of thing.
Craig, what about you over at Dodocase?
I mean, what does it look like to you? It's all brand new, so there are lots of ways, whether it's an interactive experience, some sort of gamified thing, some sort of content that really connects with you. The sky's the limit because of the tools that are available through Unity and some of the others.
I mean, I think one of the models people are batting around is like the magic room model. So you're going to see like a doorway, you can enter it, and then you can have some kind of immersive brand experience where you're interacting with components or learning something or gaining tokens to spend later. I mean, I think that's definitely, there's going to be an investment in that. Unfortunately, though, there's so much 2D content that I think there's going to be so much pressure, economic pressure to just port it in, that we're going to see a lot of posters on walls in VR for a while.
A whole lot of branded objects, right?
Yeah.
Craig, over at Dodocase, where and what are the opportunities for brands right now for live events, and where are you guys seeing sort of the near future opportunities for you specifically when you're talking about branded headsets? Like, what are you guys doing now? Where are the opportunities in the next maybe couple of years for you?
Right. Yeah, so for us, we participated in a number of live events, and it's really around solving the problem of there wasn't an addressable audience for people who own these headsets, and it's going to remain a problem for many years to come. So to give you a couple of specific examples of how our product was used, at Comic-Con the last couple of years, AT&T and Conan O'Brien wanted to give fans the best seat in the house. So they set up a 360 camera right next to Conan, in between him and the guest. And we sent out 35,000 of these to individual influencers around the US, and they could tune in at a single moment in time and be on stage with Conan O'Brien. A second way we see live, which is a little bit different than the other panelists, is we participate with brands at a lot of live events. So we worked with Mountain Dew on the Dew Tour, and it's kind of interesting because you're sitting there watching a live event in the real world, but they wanted to give fans access to how the athletes are prepping. So how are the slope style athletes preparing their bikes? To your point earlier around that sort of intimacy and access that the brands have, I think that's super powerful, and has always been sort of one of the sort of underpinning opportunities around virtual reality for me, is anytime you can get access to a place, a situation that you would never have access to, it creates a real compelling use case for 360. So we have a lot of clients doing a lot of different things and approaching it in a lot of different ways. We do see a lot of the grassroots campaigns because we don't really have minimums. We've done campaigns of 20 units to 400,000 units. So we do see a lot of real estate plays right now, a lot of just sort of individual agents bringing VR into their world and allowing their clients to shop, they film stuff via a Matterport camera or something like that, and they're sending VR viewers to Asian buyers to sell penthouses in New York and things like that.
I want to say thanks, guys, for being so specific. Like that's I think very helpful. So much appreciated already. Annie, I'm gonna start with you first because you're right here. I want to talk about roadblocks. Let's talk about nitty-gritty things that are in our way. Things that are blocking you from whatever you're trying to do. What are some of the current roadblocks that you see in terms of live events and brands? What are some of the technological challenges that we have to overcome?
The tech.
Just like your partner staying up until 2 a.m.
The tech is very challenging. The baseline, whenever we're meeting with somebody, we're like, this is not easy. We're not just sticking up a camera and pressing record. It's 26 cameras and then stitching them all. And so we're more of a production services house, so we make the VR videos or the 360 videos. So it's getting on the scene, and then oftentimes because the 360 experiences they do have a lower view count than television, we do not get sometimes best camera placement. We're sometimes the third fiddle, maybe the fourth fiddle in some of these things. And for VR, camera placement is everything. You need to be, that's a tech question. When the screens have a higher resolution, then we can have wider shots. But until that happens, you've got to, I say you never want to put a person less than 2.5 feet away from the camera, and if you want to see their face and if you want to have an emotional connection, which is generally what people want in advertising, you can't have anybody 7.5 feet away from the camera.
Okay.
So that's pretty close, and if the telecast camera needs a clean shot, you've got a lot of issues. So that's that's on the production element standpoint. Then it's just physically it takes a lot of time. There's the monoscopic versus stereoscopic, and then we strongly...
Can you elaborate on mono versus stereo for people quickly?
So, stereo vision, 2 eyes, 2 vision, you can see depth. It's a whole nother plane, and it's just a whole nother level of tricky stitching errors because 2 cameras are seeing the same image differently, and then your brain through your eyes makes the difference. This one, some fancy algorithm is making the difference / your brain is filling in the gaps sometimes. That becomes a insurmountable problem given how close you are to the camera. Again, it goes back to the 2.5 feet. But also if there's motion, all of these fun, compelling things that you want to have in VR. Again, motion, light, motion, sound, those are the main core things that attract the eye in traditional as well as in VR. So it's important that those technical hurdles are solved. So the monoscopics or stereoscopics, you really want to shoot everything stereoscopic for VR, but remember that Facebook and YouTube are all monoscopic. So, it's hard to make the case for that greater investment if the company really has no interest in going further. And I mean, we had one advertiser who had contractually, they were only allowed to release it on Facebook.
Right.
So the stereoscopic question, we're like, but for archival purposes, you want it in stereo? And they're like, no, sorry, we don't.
No.
We're gonna sell this thing in the summer and then it'll be gone.
Yeah.
So those technical components, then it takes longer. But we've been in this business for almost 3 or 4 years now. The tech does get exponentially better every time. So there's those elements, and then just consumers, how consumers are able to find content is challenging. I do think the distribution side has not come close. The interfaces are not there yet, I believe. When I have my sister, she lives in Boston, she's very tech savvy. I still have not able to somehow explain to her how to watch some of the stuff I've done. So when that happens, until I can explain it to somebody who's pretty tech savvy, I think we've got a distribution problem.
I think all that comes down to the cost of production. All those things you have to think about, all those efforts you have to go through are so much more expensive than the media that it's being compared against.
Yep.
That the earned media becomes like the big prize in these efforts, but now we're sort of 3.5 years in for the modern era of VR. It's less exciting. You're not getting coverage for your brand in the New York Times just because you did a 360 film anymore. So we're in really a delicate point of the VR industry, I think, because you can't sell on the things that sold forward-thinking brand marketers anymore, or it's getting harder and harder to, and we still don't have the addressable audience problem solved that it's a traditional, that we can compare the costs with the ROI and the eyeballs that are seeing it.
Yeah, I think you have to just be really smart about why you're making the VR experience. And we've said to a company, sorry, I don't think that it's not worth it for you guys to do this. And they were very thankful. They went and hired us for a bigger job afterwards because they appreciated our honesty. But you have to say, is this something that is best served to be shot in this and gone through this effort? Is it going to be so much more compelling that people really are going to remember it? And they do. I mean, if you say yes and you're honest about that, then you will. You'll have much lower numbers, but you'll have much higher retention. And we worked with a lighting tech company out of Virginia. They make industrial lights for, it's like AC direct lights for cities and large buildings and parking lots and everything like that. They made a huge campaign, a very expensive, huge campaign with multiple videos we shot in multiple states, all during the snow, and every plane was late. And they knew that maybe about 8 people were going to watch it. But they signed one of those contracts, they've made it like $10 million.
All right.
So that was a good use for VR.
That sounds like a really fantastic use, actually.
I would say, just to jump in on the production side for live events, I mean, it's one of those things too, you kind of touched on it from a stitching perspective, but it's also just the pipeline of getting content through the broadcast pipeline, whether it's a satellite truck or it's your gigabit uplink or whatever it is. The infrastructure there required you're basically pushing a 4K stream at this point. That's about all that can go out. You want it to be actually higher than that. We actually want it to be like an 8K stream that's going out, because but the headsets can't display that, and the pipes can't can't actually push that. So there's big challenges there, and that's a lot of the reason why you hear this monoscopic versus stereoscopic, because monoscopic 4K is 2 times the resolution of stereoscopic 4K file, because it's actually 2K per eye. So there's big challenges there, and you look at the infrastructure.
When he says big challenges, like, he has a big challenge.
Yeah, like
I do not envy the problems you have.
17 cameras at a Coldplay shoot in Chicago that are running through, that are all stitching in real time, that are all coming back to a broadcast truck and then going into a director monitor and actually director cut going out. Like the infrastructure that we had to put in place in order to make that happen is not something that you can do on a small scale level. It had to be a Coldplay and a Samsung and a Soldiers Field, and there's like all of the things had to align for that. So I'm hopeful that there's people like Live Planet and some others that are coming out that we're going to be able to get to this place where we can democratize the live event a bit more. So you can go into like the Echo in Echo Park, or you can go into some small theater and see a really great intimate band play and not have to worry about some of these technical challenges.
David, what about you? When you are trying to make haptic accompaniments at Immersion, what are some of the roadblocks for you currently?
Yeah, I mean, for us, there aren't really any roadblocks for doing that. We do haptic treatments really fast. In a live event scenario, we could turn around haptics, not necessarily in the 7-second delay, but fairly close. I think really the challenge for us is mind share and kind of having this medium be recognized by creatives as a creative medium, having them recognize that it's actually a possibility, and just kind of exploring the space. I mean, my team is really concerned with kind of developing the medium and creating design guidelines and best practices, and training others, certifying others for this work. And so we just kind of need scale and mindshare at this point.
So when you were talking earlier, you mentioned haptic creative assets. Will you spell that out a little bit more for us?
Sure. Yeah. So sure. So in the case of the mobile phone for 360 video or 2D video, you have a haptic file. So backing up to the tool. So usually this work's done by somebody sort of like an editor or a sound mixer. There's a multi-track GUI that is used, and there are tracks of visuals, there are tracks of audio, and there's a linear time domain track of haptics. That could control a vibrator or a force feedback display, whatever you want. And you have somebody who has a monitor, some kind of device that they're feeling as they work and testing, just kind of the editing process. When they're done, they export, they solo that track, they export it, and they convert it into a hapt file, which is our file format, and then that can be...
Is that your proprietary file format?
That is, yes.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah, and so if you have... And so we have, endpoints can be just HTML5 website. It could be our SDK, and then if that file served up, it's going to be synchronized. So,
can you then distribute it on YouTube or Facebook?
So in those cases, we would have to be partnered with YouTube and Facebook for that to happen.
But it is possible.
It is absolutely possible, yeah. So we work with kind of the big ad networks like Teads, AdCallMe, things like that. So if you're watching a video in their player on a web page, you're going to feel haptic effects. So yeah, it's really just about kind of convincing people, building out the art as kind of a medium.
Cool, thank you. Jeff, you mentioned some of the roadblocks being bandwidth, and you work at Live Nation. You have a deal with Next VR, and I've seen the production bus that they roll up in. It's huge. So you talked a little bit. How do you get past the roadblocks?
What do we need to get past them?
Yeah.
There's a number of different things. I mean, we are starting to get past them now. The Next VR truck, they have a very particular way that they broadcast, and they're very high-end broadcast. That's why the NBA has chosen them as their 2018 partner. We love what they do, pushing 180 stereoscopic. The reason they're at 180 is to push high-quality stereoscopic. There's a whole reasoning behind all of that, but we can do fly packs now, which is, give us a closet at your venue and we can stick some server fly packs in there and cable our cameras back to that and actually, live stitch from there and push out from there. So it's all changing quite a bit. And when I mentioned Live Planet, I haven't seen what those guys are doing in a couple of months now, but guys like that, systems like that are...
Can you tell us more about the Live Planet
Yeah, we're not associated with Live Planet at all. Even though Live Nation, Live Planet, it's not related. They're a software platform that's basically, and they have a camera system, and it's basically geared to allow any camera system, not just theirs, to be able to live stream quickly and easily for 360 and VR, so Facebook Live, et cetera. It's a really cool way to sort of democratize it, because all of a sudden, all you need is a laptop and a couple cameras and an interface to bring those cameras in. And that, again, starts to really change the game. Bandwidth still is an issue there, but not as much because of things like encoding getting better and the way that the streams are actually coming in. So this is like the whole thing. Like, this is like the whole media landscape in live, right? It's like, for years, it was how would we ever transmit 4K? And now Are you kidding me? If you're not transmitting 4K, in a lot of senses, you're not broadcast ready. So it just requires, the smart brains that are working on the tech to continue to work on the tech and make it better and better.
All right, Craig, what about you over at Dodocase? What are some of the roadblocks that you see currently for brands, live events?
Yeah, I think for our clients, it usually comes down to cost. So cost of the headset. So if they've arrived at my door, they've recognized like they need to give away some of these things in order to get some of the viewers or some of the buzz that they require in their campaign.
And by give away a few of these things, you're talking about the branded headsets, right?
Cardboard headsets, or our smart VR headset. Yeah, so I can't tell you how many times someone has come to us and said, I want to give away 100,000 or 1 million of these, and then you give them the price tag, and they're like, I want to give away 1,000 of these things. And it's not, and you can only cut corners so far, like the lens quality. Look, I never sit on any of these panels and say like the product that we produce, rivals an Oculus or a Vive or even a Gear VR. But we have positioned ourselves as the quality provider of Google Cardboard headsets, and so we don't skimp on the lens quality. So therefore, just to give you the audience sort of order of magnitude, it's not until sort of north of 5,000 units that you drive down around the $5 price point for these things. But it doesn't substantially decrease from that when you're at 100,000 units. So that's the rub in there. Like, you can only compress. These things end up getting constructed by human beings, and if you have a high quality lens in there, you just can't get it down to $2 a unit or what have you, and have anything that has any semblance of quality.
So we talked about roadblocks, and why is it worth it? Why is it worth it, Craig? Why do you do this?
Well, I think it's a magical experience for people, and I've had the good fortune of participating in a lot of live demos where I'm the one giving someone their first experience, and the moment you convince them to move beyond their forward-thinking view and they realize they're in a 360 environment, there's the VR smile that I think Robert Scoble coined the term, the VR smile, and it happens time and time again. I was just in Toronto at an event called Future Fest, and it's Fortune 500 CMOs learning about trends and the futuristic opportunities for marketers. And I can't tell you how many of these individual CMOs had never had a VR experience at all. And that was surprising to me. I mean, we had an AR headset we were going to expose people to, figuring that was going to be the new. But I spent all evening showing 360 videos and seeing people saying, wow, this is a great marketing opportunity. And I was like, welcome to 2017. You could have been welcomed in 2014 to this phenomenon.
Annie, what about you? We talked about roadblocks, but why do you have Vanishing Point Media? Why do you do this?
Well, we love it. The first time I tried VR, I had my son with me. He was in a stroller. He was plugged in. And
plugged into the stroller?
He was plugged in, like the
got strapped in.
seatbelt. He was very secure and safe. The brake was on. And I put on the headset, and I was so transported, the mama bear in me instantly said, my kid's gone. And I reached out and I grabbed him, and I squeezed him so hard he screamed. And I had that experience, and I was like, wow, I have been transported in an instant on a metaphysical way. And I was hooked. I loved it. And I was working on a project, and I go back to BJ, and I'm like, hey, so we're going to stop everything, and I want you to watch this right now. And we haven't looked back since. And every time we started in 2014, so we were at VRLA, doing booth after booth at like all of these conventions, meeting people, and every single time I put the headset on, people stand there, I'm like, okay, now look around. Whoa! Wow, and you get that smile, and it's wonderful. It really is.
All right, David, what about you? Why do you do this? If there are so many roadblocks, well, you seem like you have it all figured out. You seem very confident.
Yeah, no, I do this because the promise of VR, which goes back to the 90s, is like this promise of transcendence. Like, you can go another place, right? And the VR smile is totally valid. But I was really fascinated. I don't know who was at dinner last night, but one of the panelists was saying he was on a dragon ride, and in VR, and he reached out to pet the dragon and accidentally touched a physical, like a fan in front of him, and screamed that he was actually touching something. It was totally unexpected, right? So even VR, even though we call it immersive, like the promise isn't there until you can be present, and to be present is to be physically present. So I do this to kind of bridge that gap and to really like unlock the promise of VR.
All right, Jeff. Yes.
Well, to be present, I want to bring up location-based entertainment and its application for you and also for you, Mr. Nicholas, in terms of events, not live streaming, but where would location-based fit into everybody's view?
I mean, location-based is going to be enormously important for awareness. You know, when you're talking about Middle America, for example, you know, I'm originally from Indiana. When I'm talking about this technology to people from my hometown, they have no idea what I'm talking about. However, when we have location-based entertainment, what it does is it taps into existing consumer behavior. This is what I do. I get in my car, I drive to a thing, I buy a ticket, and I do something with another group of people. And when you're looking at the investment that's going in that specific sector, Dreamscape Immersive, they just got $20 million from AMC, for example. They're going to be rolling out, I believe, 6 flagship locations over the next 18 months or so. And that's, you know, when we're talking about a very small addressable market right now, you know, as a person, let's say I'm in Indiana, and I've never seen VR, why would I possibly go out and spend a bunch of money so I have more equipment, because I probably don't have a PC that's powerful enough, right? So when we're talking about these standalone headsets, those are really important as well, to have a, you know, Oculus Go that's priced at $199. But location-based entertainment, like in my opinion, is absolutely huge, and that's where a lot of the opportunities for actual revenue will be in the next couple of years.
I think that actually goes to what I was going to say about why we're doing this. It's twofold for me. One, to sort of echo what everybody's saying, the emotional response and the metaphysical response to it. I ran an agency for years, and when it came into my office, and I watched my first piece of VR, I basically made a plan to leave the agency. I mean, that's what happened. And I left the agency and then came over to Live Nation to follow this sort of path of making VR content, or, you know, immersive content in multiple different ways. But on the business side, you know, why Live Nation? Why are we getting into it when it's so small and it has all these roadblocks? There are lots of opportunities as this develops to bridge the gap between artist and fan. That's what we're all about. Live music, right? We're about that emotional connection that you have to music, that feeling that you have at a live show, that experience that you have. We're never going to match it in VR. You're never going to get the experience in VR that you have when you're next to, you know, all of that energy and all of that, you know, live music experience. But we can get damn close. And it takes things like location-based and things like Dodocase and things like standalone headset and things like mobile-based headset. It takes all of that to sort of build this wheel that serves itself. So if your first entry point is location-based is not only going to be just a first entry point, it's going to be an amazing experience, because you think about a console game system that was in your house versus the arcade, like when those two were really, you know, big differentiators, you would go to the arcade because the experience you would get from the arcade game was so different and so much of a more tactile experience than what you would get at home. That's what location-based is going to be for this. Whereas Dodocase might be, hey, I got given this thing and all of a sudden I've checked this out, I want to know more. How do I find out more? Maybe I'll go location, maybe I'll buy a standalone. Maybe I'll buy a $99 thing because I've got the right phone and my phone will plug in. But all of them feed each other. And so as we go along this chain, I think what we're seeing is there's been a big fragmentation, and it's been like two camps. It's like mobile and tethered. And now what we've got and what we're starting to see for 2018 is going to be mobile, tethered, cardboard, location, untethered, and you can kind of enter in whichever way your technical aptitude will allow you to enter in. I'm stoked for standalone because all of a sudden I can just pick this thing up and put it on and I'm in VR. Then discovery, then UI, that's where we need a lot of advancements. But you saw Oculus roll out a bunch of that yesterday.
Right.
So.
All right, so I want to kind of segue into giving people sort of advice.
Also, before you do,
go for it.
Oculus's thing about getting 1 billion people into VR, you're talking about a company like Facebook that is trying to get 1 billion people into VR. Why are we doing this? Because we've got people like that, companies like that believe enough in it that will back it enough that we know that this is going to happen.
Yeah, and when Facebook also starts making announcements, the live 360 streaming has been accessible to consumers since earlier this year, right? But then we're talking about actually being able to jump into that 360 live stream via Facebook Spaces. You have a huge 8,000-pound gorilla saying this. We are very, very invested in it. We know Facebook spent $3 billion on acquiring Oculus back in 2014. There's a lot of skin in the game. There's a lot of vested interest there.
Facebook Spaces is awesome.
It is.
And Venues, which is about to come, which just got announced sort of quietly yesterday, is fucking awesome.
That one flew under my radar, actually. Tell us about that.
I can't
I didn't
tell you
hear about
anything
it.
more than you can find in press releases. But you can find it on the internet.
But from what people
Find the internet.
If people didn't see it on the internet, my cursory view of it was you're going to be able to watch live concerts and things like that, and their Venues is a productization of that experience, which is clearly super positive for you guys.
It's a social experience around live events.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So the people in the room, what advice would you have for them if people are thinking about getting into it, or if they haven't, perhaps they're already in the space? What advice would you have from your own experiences, and maybe even some resources that you can kind of refer people to?
On a production standpoint, I say just start shooting. I mean, go out and buy yourself just the little gear camera. And if you're living in Oklahoma, you're living in Boston.
The Insta360 as well, by the way, if you have an Apple device, that's going to be a nice sort of really approachable price point that you can just kind of plug in your phone and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a huge learning curve. I'm a good American. I've watched hours and hours of television. I have not watched hours and hours of VR. Yeah. Every time I watch a VR experience, I learn something about production, camera placement, story, character, how to move all that stuff. You only learn it by doing it. We have, a little theta in our office, and there's so many times when I have our receptionist, I'm like, okay, just read this, and I'm gonna walk behind you and see when we get sick, and I'm gonna walk in front of you, and I'm gonna walk on your side, and we're just going through the motions of what the actual physical elements are of making. And then once you get comfortable with that, there are so many so many brands and so many companies, there's so many applications, you can just start working. And that's how we came to be. We just bought all these cameras and we needed to practice, and then we told people, and then we got hired for a job, and then the next job, and the next job, and now we don't have a company reel yet because we don't have time to put it together.
A terrible problem. Yeah. That's a good problem to have. David, at Immersion, what about you? What advice would you give people, or what sort of resources would you direct them to?
Yeah, well, for brands, I would say think about what your goal is and what mediums or media will serve that best. So you have live events. Those are certain number of people are going to tune in, but then how do you have this long tail of value? How do you bring more and more people into that that activity after the fact and allow things to kind of spread virally? It could be that you want to create an immersive experience that is recorded somehow, that has some of the live qualities of it, that feeling of presence. Haptics can help with that. There are certain touch points of brands. We work with automotive manufacturers. I think Peugeot is one of my favorite ads that we ever did, where you could feel the shifting of the car and you could feel the car driving by. The whole point of that ad was the power of the engine, and that really came through with haptics. So there was a tactile quality they were trying to communicate, and so you communicated that with haptics. If there are visual elements or elements of visual immersion, you would want to do 360. So I think it's just really looking at what your message is and figuring out what media and kind of what sensory elements you want to include.
Jeff from Live Nation.
Yeah,
what about
it's
you?
funny. I'm going to take a different. He's had his hand up a lot, so we should probably get his question. I'm going to take a different approach a little bit, where I do agree that picking up the camera and experimenting is definitely key to getting more people involved. From the brand perspective, we are now in a place in VR where it's no longer you can no longer release a 360 video and just say, look at this thing that I did, and it's got bad stitching and it isn't really that thought out, and you'll get a bunch of love from it. You really need to pick, if you're going to be serious about it and be spending real money, you need to pick partners that know what they're doing, like yourself, or like other production companies that really do, or build it up internally, but that really do understand the nuances of creating this content or creating these live streams. I've seen so much bad content, and I've seen so many terrible live streams where it's one camera placed too far away from something, and the reality is it's a waste of money. People have literally, you might as well have burnt it, thrown it in the toilet, lit it on fire. You really, there's a quality standard that's being established. And if you're not going and working with the right people, you're not going to hit that standard, and you're not going to get what you want out of that content. So be really conscious of that.
Craig, what about you? And we'll get to your question in a moment, sir.
Yeah, just to reiterate something that Jeff mentioned about the spectrum of VR, and whether it's smartphone or Gear VR Daydream level, Oculus 5 home-based, location-based, like understand when you're going to be producing an event, what your objectives are and how you're going to achieve them. And it may be perfectly fine to do a completely Vive-centric experience for your brand because that's meeting your objectives. Or it may make sense to totally exclude the home-based market and only focus on the smartphone. And your production value and the types of things you're going to do are going to change based on those objectives. And there's not a right or a wrong thing. It's just really going to be on an individual brand and budget basis, I think.
So I guess it's a two-part question. My first one for David, I think a cool collaboration for you and Mr. Nicholas would be to develop some sort of lab experience for possibly like a blind person. Because virtual reality, people often think there has to be a visual element, but if you have haptics mixed with like an audio mix, you can really do a really cool experience for a blind person where you bring them to a lot of events, mixing the haptics, and it can be kind of a way of turning VR upside down. Something that people might not love. The other thing I was going to say is just, have you seen strides being made as far as the platform that the user experience is being hosted on? So like, I've only really dealt with some Oculus stuff. I've tried some of the AI stuff in their offices and their studios. The biggest issue I have is like you guys have mentioned, is finding that content. Like if you're making stuff for a brewery and you're bringing that off the field, where do I find that? That's the most challenging part. I think as a consumer, it doesn't seem like there's one Netflix right now. That might be the Oculus.
There's a website that was started by a woman out in New York. It's called Surf. They do a great job of indexing content. You can go to their website and check that out. And then in terms of content platforms, Oculus Home just got a bunch of really great updates. I haven't been able to try them out myself yet, but apparently the interface is much more user-friendly. You can super multitask, and that content curation is supposed to be a lot better. So I've seen a lot of improvements.
Yeah,
really.
there is a lot of improvement. I think the biggest challenges, some of the biggest challenges, there is a lot. We've discussed a lot of them today, but some of them are discovery and usability. I know when I go to demo something for somebody, if I go to an artist manager and I'm like, here, let me show you the stuff we're working on. The process of doing that is still, it's fucking ridiculous. Like, because no one knows how to use the headset. I'm clicking a Samsung phone or a whatever, a Google phone into a headset. Now I've got to, okay, put this on. Now look at this thing. I'm going to tap it for you because you don't realize where the button is. It's hard to navigate. Like it's, right?
Yeah.
So and part of that has been because it's been created in a vacuum. And so there hasn't been user data to sort of influence the design. And now that we have user data influencing the design, you see Oculus Home, it has gotten a lot better. The touch controls are a lot simpler. And even the Samsung Gear VR, remember like the first version of it, the thing was so easy to hit accidentally because of how it was positioned. They recessed it and so all of those things are coming. I think we're still in like a beta mode almost. If you look at 2018, 2019, that's where we start to hit stride.
Just real quick,
That's my opinion.
That's my interesting feedback that I have is like, I'm pretty tech savvy, but I almost feel like my mom trying to turn on a computer.
Yeah. We all do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
for
why
sure.
the standalone headset, I think, is going to be the killer.
Huge.
Because all of a sudden you put it on, and you don't have to
Standalone's
do anything.
pretty
Yeah, you don't have to
You just look around and you go, here's this great piece of content it's serving me.
Yeah, and then fundamentally, this isn't really only about live events or brands or advertising or entertainment, right? We're in Los Angeles, so welcome to Hollywood, right? So we talk about content a lot and entertainment, but fundamentally what we're at right now is the brink of the immersive computing revolution. So spatialized computing, 3D computing, whatever it is. And so even in my personal opinion, I think that 360 video is an art form, a beautiful art form that has a limited length of time because we have volumetric capture, we have light field technology coming up pretty faster than a lot of people think. Actually, it's faster than a lot of people think.
Faster,
but the
yeah, but
important
it's still
part,
a while off.
The important part is being able to think spatially,
Right.
Right, and so that fundamental cognizance and being able to think spatially, I think, is the huge takeaway from 360 video.
It was one of the things we talked about on a panel yesterday, the industrial, the medical, baking this into your life sort of version of AR and VR, that's where we're going to get to this place of real scale, because all of a sudden it becomes a tool that I'm using all the time. It's a novelty when it's purely entertainment.
Yeah.
If you think about a computer or a phone, sorry to cut you off, but you think about a computer or a phone, computer was my word processor. Oh, wait, there's a game? I'm going to go play that. The phone was, I'm going to call you, or I'm going to use the calculator. And then apps came. So we sort of went backwards with VR, but all the industry, and it's starting to kind of catch up.
All right, we got to wrap it up. So let's go down the line, remind people who you are, what your company is, and where we can find you.
Annie Lukowski, Vanishing Point Media, VR production company, and you can find us at vanishingpointvr.com.
Cool, thank you. David?
All right, David Birnbaum, Haptics, one word in description. And I work at Immersion, and the URL is immersion.com. I just want to say one thing about your idea, which I think is important. So we talk about AR, and AR, again, we always assume that we're like putting a layer of visual things on the world. We're doing some interesting work now where we're layering on haptic things. So you can't see anything, but the world around you will start to feel different, and you're going to be having layers that you can, they can be promoted, they could be for utilitarian reasons. And so I think if we can think more broadly about the sensory experience than just VR is goggles, I think we're going to make much better content.
Jeff?
Jeff Nicholas, I'm at Live Nation. You can find us at a venue near you. You can find our content on the Hulu VR app or Samsung VR or Next VR.
Awesome. Craig?
Craig Dalton, Dodocase VR. You can email me at craig@dodocasevr, and we're at dodocasevr.com.
And my name is Malia Probst. I'm with VR Scout and the WXR Fund. You can email me if you want. It's malia@vrscout.com. But really, don't really email me. I love LinkedIn, so I love that. And the Twitters, I love the Twitters. I'm at the Malia. And we do tons of content at VR Scout about the VR and AR space, so check all that out, whether it's in any distributed channel or our .com. And I host a couple podcasts, so check those out. One is the VR Scout Report, and the other one is The Real Virtual Show. Let's give these guys a hand.